Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Well, if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt. I am the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast. I mean, you may have already. You're listening right now. But you can find us over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, basically anywhere you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would truly appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on the social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and I dare say it is the most important thing, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large, because if we love to watch it and talk about it and write about it, we love it when you come and listen and read about it. So please come on by. As some of you may or may not have noticed, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus for a while. Sort of an unintentional, intentional one. We've been in lockdown up here in Toronto, Canada, where, well, not lockdown really, but there have been theaters. New releases have been a little slow, and, you know, the winter blahs, the winter fatigue, the tireds, the sads, whatever you want to call it. But had some stuff to deal with and needed a little bit of a mental reset for ourselves as well. And to anyone listening who may feel the same way, don't hesitate to do that yourself, because it's an important thing this day and age to look after you and take care of your own mental well-being and so on and so forth. But like I said, you know, it's never going to last too long, and we are back, and we're back with a really special one today, because the film we're talking about is called Salt in My Soul, and it's playing theatrically in New York and Los Angeles, and it's heading on to VOD this coming January 25th, and it's a fantastic story, and it's based on the posthumously published best-selling memoir of the same name, which takes you into the life and the mind of a young woman who lives life to the most while she's dying. It's about Mallory Smith. She was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was 3 years old, and she had a 25-year battle with a deadly disease, and she lived one hell of a life that many of us would be envious to live if we had 3 times as long, and many of us do. She crammed in every moment of life and living as she possibly could, and from using her 2,500 pages of diaries that she kept and hours of audio recording and footage, this film really is a chronicle of a life well lived, told by the person living it. In many ways, it's a great coming of age story. It shines a light on issues like mental health, and, you know, even sort of the wellness of the world around us as well. And how important it is to really sort of highlight and push the voice of the patient, especially in these days when people are going to the hospital and getting sick. And, you know, it's scary times, but it's important to speak up, and it's important to be heard, and this is really a reminder of that. And we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with filmmaker Will Battersby and Mallory's mother, and subject of the film, Diane Smith, to talk about not just the film, but also sort of everything that came out of Mallory's death, and just sort of the importance of the message and the importance of the story and getting this out there. And I think we had a fantastic talk, which I certainly hope you enjoy, because I know that I did. Just obviously, first off, just thank you both for the time. I'm glad we got a chance to do this, and just congratulations on the film. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I guess my first question for you, Will, is when did you sort of find Mallory's story and sort of get the process going on all this?
Mhm. So in late or fall of 2019, Richard Abate, who's one of the producers on the film, sent me a copy of the book and said, "I think this would make a terrific doc." He had worked with Diane in selling the book to Random House, and I read it in one sitting and completely agreed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it was that easy. And so basically, he put me on the phone with Diane, and that's when the grilling began. Because Diane is quite rightly a very fierce gatekeeper of Mallory's legacy, and really wanted to know, what kind of film I wanted to make. So we talked a lot, talked it through, and finally she blessed the process.
Now, I mean, Diane, for you, had a movie always been in the back of your mind, given just sort of the treasure trove of resources that Mallory had left?
Not really. It was always a book, always a book, because she was a writer for so long. It never even occurred to me. And it was the same Richard that Will referenced, who said to me early on, we're going to want to do a limited series or a documentary. And I'm like, we can't even talk about it until the book comes out. I was so focused on getting those words out. But by the time Will and I connected, I had done, more than 150 talks. And I realized that you reach certain people through talks, you reach certain people through books, and then there's people that I haven't ever had the chance to connect with. And a film might be a way to connect them to Mallory's work. And I've always felt like Mallory's writing and her person, all of the materials that she worked so hard on, deserve to be seen by the wider world. So a documentary absolutely made sense at that time. It took, it was a process to get me there. But now I'm like, of course, like, duh.
And I mean, I'll tell you, it's an interesting thing, because I mean, I watched the film last night, and I mean, by the end of it, yes, I was crying, but it took me a beat to realize that not only were they sad tears, but they were happy tears as well, just because I got to sort of experience this unique person. And I mean, there have been films of a similar vein in the past, but they can tend to be a little bit hero worshipy. And what I loved about this film is that it's very much about a person and a life lived to sort of the utmost fullness. And I mean, I'm kind of curious for both of you, how important was it to sort of strike that balance and not sort of overinflate Mallory, but sort of give her this real sort of genuine human quality?
It was essential, right? And it was because you can't have a perfect protagonist, right? And I very much approach this in the way that I come from, narrative features, and so I approach this as I would a narrative feature, right? Which is, characters, scenes, the arc, and you can't have a perfect protagonist. It's the most boring thing in the world. And she wasn't perfect, right? And I think that, for her to be relatable, which I think she is infinitely. I think she's relatable because of her imperfection. And for me, it's very specifically, the sort of the mental health issue in the film, which is one of my favorite sections, really illustrates that. And it's not that she did anything wrong. It's that, the people she left behind discovered how much she'd suffered after the fact, right? And I think many of them had wished she'd shared it. Now, in the moment, that's hard, right? Very hard for people to share those things. And I think that's, I think that's hopefully one of the kind of morals of the film, as it were, lessons of the film, is that you think about that and how you share those things sort of. And I think, you will think about that precisely because we're not saying she did everything well and she did it all perfectly. So you have to be perfect, because again, you're not going to touch anybody that way, I don't think.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I'm curious for you, Diane, was it a hard sell? I mean, I guess maybe just to get the entire family on board to sort of tell the story, especially once Will had sort of convinced you on his vision.
Well, it's interesting because I never asked anybody. I just told them we're doing this. And I mean, they were at the point we started the documentary, I'd already been traveling the country talking about Mallory's story, raising money. We've been doing a fundraiser for 21 years. So it wasn't really a surprise to anybody that I wanted to keep going. I think a lot of people thought I would have burned out by now. And what I say is it's exactly the opposite. I'm energized. Every time I speak or somebody reads the book or they hear a podcast or they watch the trailer, or in any manifestation of her story, people respond. And what's crazy is, I don't know if you know, but I had written this Mallory 65 Roses, a children's book. So Mallory's story is told through the voice of a child, through a children's book, through a podcast she did at Stanford that a lot of people have heard, through a documentary, through a book, through the different talks that I do. And each time there's different layers to the story and different points of view, but nobody ever seems to get tired of hearing it. And I never, ever get tired of telling it. So it's been an exciting journey, and one that my family, I think, just had it was just never going to be any other way than to participate. That's just the way we roll, as they say.
Well, and I think that's the fascinating thing about the film, because there are these layers that are very obvious as we're watching it and we're seeing these stories unfold. And I mean, for you, Will, how was it to sort of, I guess, dive into the archive and sort of understand, I guess, how nuanced and how layered you were going to have to make this story?
It's a good question, and I think one of the things I realized early on is that, I didn't want to be preachy, right? The film touches a lot of very big issues, invisible illness, chronic illness, mental health, environmentalism, organ transplant, all sorts of stuff. And I didn't want to hit anybody over the head with that, and instead I wanted to focus on, very much having Mallory as the narrator, right? And we were so lucky to discover all of the audio and, and the video and that interview, and the sit-down interview, which was recorded by a choreographer. So nobody had ever seen that. He just used it as the basis for a dance he created. So we were incredibly lucky, to have the material, to have her as that narrator, and then, really just kind of let it unfold as a kind of classic coming of age story, right? And I think I realized this part after the fact. I have a 15-year-old daughter who, at the time she was 15, she's now 16. And I think I sort of always had her in the back of my head. It's like 15-year-olds, they don't watch documentaries generally. I was like, what could I do to get her to watch this film and love it, right? And walk away from it knowing things that I haven't had to tell her I'm teaching her, right? And so I think that really informed kind of how we structured it, keeping it, because it's very sad at times, it's like you're saying, it's incredibly moving, but to make sure that some of those tears are also happy tears and tears that are inspired tears, right? And that you feel a kind of, it's like that shared thing of like, we all keep secrets, we all suffer in secret, and you can sort of share that a little bit with Mallory, but come out of it at the end feeling like, okay, I can get out of bed. I can put one foot in front of the other and move forward. So those were sort of all the things sort of rattling around in my head while we were making it.
Amazing. And I mean, I'm just for both of you, because I mean, especially in watching the film, obviously you can't plan these things, but given how the world is sort of at the peak of COVID fatigue right now, it really feels like this is a movie that the universe almost needs, because it does have those happy tears, and it's okay to have those happy tears. And I'm curious from both your perspectives on just being able to release this story now, where a lot of people are going through a lot of heartbreak, but also need to find those happy tears at the same time.
I mean, I personally, I'm thrilled, right? And because also it was bizarre that, I mean, our cinematographer was in Hawaii shooting the B-roll for us, all the underwater photography and everything. Right. And we literally called him. I called him at night. I said, Freddie, you need to be at the airport at 4 a.m. because they're shutting New York down. I mean, we literally got that in like under the wire. And then to be editing during COVID, when you realize that your subject, Mallory, is wearing a mask all the time. She has to stay 6 feet apart from people. So the sort of the COVID metaphor became really evident very quickly. And a lot of the protocols for COVID come from the cystic fibrosis world.
Yeah.
That needing to avoid that spread of germs because they're so immunocompromised. And we thought about, how hard do we hit that on the head, right? And then I thought, let's not, because we don't, nobody wants to watch a movie about COVID right now, right? Like you say, but what we need is some catharsis because of our experience of COVID, right? So that's what a metaphor is for, right? It allows you to experience it while thinking you're experiencing something else. and then there's the extraordinary moment we had with Travis Flores, who's in the film, who goes through his lung transplant during COVID. And that's the only explicit reference, just because also how he deals with that, I don't want to give any spoilers, is so beautiful in terms of bringing so much of the film together, and Mallory's writing. So I feel really lucky, honestly. And it feels like, the only word I can think of is kismet, right? It's like,
right.
It's interesting because from my perspective, I wasn't sure if the timing would work, because people are experiencing their own loss now that's actually current. Mallory was 4 years ago. But what I now understand is that this film, A, it allows you to feel something. B, it introduces the patient voice at a time everybody agrees that nobody's listening to the patients. And also the reaction I get from doctors and nurses and healthcare providers to her story in general, whether it's through the trailer or the book or the talk, is that Mallory reminds healthcare providers why they went into medicine in the first place. So for that reason, I feel very good about the timing of it. On one hand, it's tragic because it's opening in theaters in 10 days, and we're right in the middle of COVID. But on the other hand, you could say, well, it's also very easily downloadable and available on digital, so it's okay. But it's really just tragic to me that I live in LA, Will's in New York, and we were going to be together with the people in the film and do a celebration of Mallory's life and toast her and launch the film, and we can't do that. So that part is a little bit sad, but it really is overshadowed by the fact that everybody's stuck at home and everybody's depressed and everybody's fatigued. And I'm hoping that if this film does bring tears of joy along with the tears of sadness and a reminder of why we have to listen to patients and that patient stories are important, then for that reason, I feel very good about the timing.
No, and I couldn't agree with you more. And something else that I agree with you on, Diane, just in terms of sort of needing to listen to the patient. And I love how the film shows how proactive your family was in terms of research, in finding alternative treatments, in finding other things, because it's an important mentality to have, because you can be in another situation where a doctor will say, yeah, we're not going to do anymore. And you need to be able to say, no, we're going to keep trying, go to hell. Let's keep figuring some stuff out. How important was it for you to sort of show those things in the film? Because that's not something a lot of people would sort of think about. They may just sort of defer to the inevitable, which is, a sad thing.
That's true. So I learned something when I was a parent / caregiver sitting bedside at Stanford. It was confirmed. My suspicion back then, Mallory would have been, let's say, 20. My suspicion back then was a parent like me, that's strong, that's educated, that pushes, that asks questions, was not rewarded. And in fact, we were deemed bad parents. And I was actually told that by several doctors. Doctors don't want often to hear from pushy parents. My feeling is they should be embracing the knowledge that we bring, the information that we have, because we're sitting there and we know things that they don't know. And it should, but the system is a little bit broken. And I think we all know that. The New England Journal of Medicine, in case you're not aware, has launched an ebook very recently, The Power of the Patient Voice. Their perspective is how to improve your financial performance by listening to patients. Mine is we get better outcomes when we engage in storytelling and story hearing. And so I have been unleashed in a whole new direction using Mallory's story, but taking it much further. And I've been doing a lot of talks about why it's important to use writing in healing for patients and also for providers, because I do understand now this huge problem we have. Healthcare providers, nurses, doctors, anybody working in the healthcare setting right now is exhausted, fatigued, and stressed out. And they have a point of view, and they're being asked to do things that they shouldn't be asked. And the term burnout, which everybody uses to imply what's happening, imposes that feeling on the provider that they're not strong enough to be able to withstand the pressure. But in fact, I've been educated to understand that it's really moral injury, that we are asking of our caregivers things that are not normal and not okay. And as a result, they are suffering. So they have a point of view too. So I think it's not just the patient voice. It's actually better communication between patients and providers and listening to caregivers and having more conversation and dialogue and storytelling that I think will make it better for everybody. And I'm hoping that Mallory's story is a reminder to the healthcare profession.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree with you more. No, and I mean, I hope it is too. And I'm curious from both your perspectives on this, because as engaging and as sort of unique a person as Mallory was, in watching the film, I did get this sense that if she had been here to maybe see the film, she may not have enjoyed having the spotlight on her. I'm kind of curious, how did you both sort of manage with that? Because on one end, getting her story out is obviously something she would have wanted, and it's a beautiful thing. But at the same time, I did get the feeling that she would not have wanted the spotlight at the same time.
No, the interesting thing is that there are a lot of young people in the CF world, and I mean across the board, that want to tell their story. Many of them do it in social media. And Mallory was never the one putting the camera on herself and telling her story. She recorded moments, but they were never to post. And every time she communicated with the world, it was with her words. So for her, writing was really her medium. And that's why the documentary had to come after the book from my perspective. But I do think that she would be dumbstruck to think that the world is watching this film, reading her book, hearing the audio version, listening to me at grand rounds, educating doctors that get CME credit from hearing what her insights were. I think she would be blown away. But it does do what every parent that loses a child wants, and that is help you make peace with the fact that your child did not die in vain, and that there is some purpose for what happened, that you have to take lemons and turn them into lemonade. If you don't, you'll have a nervous breakdown and die, because losing a child is unfathomable unless you've experienced it. And even still, I'm actually having dinner tonight with two of my grief group friends. And the thing we always say to each other is, how is there a world, in my case without Mallory, in Andrea's case without Bradley, and Nikki's case without Tommy? How is there a world where these people that we lived to serve and take care of don't exist anymore? It's not the natural order. And it will never, ever, ever feel right or okay.
No, I mean, and that's beautifully said. And I think that's probably the right note to end on, because I mean, again, in watching this film, there's tragedy, there's heartbreak, but there's hope, and there's importance of appreciating life and understanding life. And I mean, especially at a time right now when we're all tired and we're all fed up, and there's a lot of people hurting for a variety of reasons, it's important to see sort of, even just to have that example of someone who had the determination to keep going, because a lot of people who are in not necessarily as worse condition as Mallory was don't have that kind of determination. And I think you've put a fantastic thing on the screen.
Bravo, Will.
Thank you. I'm not going to say anything because I'll only ruin it, but thank you, Dave. It's been a very moving thing to be a part of, right? Because I realized that I was part of a group of people's grief, and they entrusted this, incredibly beautiful but specific story to me. And what's lovely is seeing that it's touching people, as you say, and that's such a
it's weird. That's the weird part. I got to jump in. That is the weird part. So David, we've never met. I don't know who you are. You didn't know who I was. So to hear you say that this is meaningful is like, now I can actually take a breath and feel okay, because what we're hearing now is that people really do like the film. It's very hard to be objective. I mean, it's hard for me to be objective. I didn't make the film, but it's really overwhelming.
I think the more people see it, the more breaths you're both going to be able to take. And just thank you for the work, and thank you for the time today. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.